Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So Will and I are going to co-facilitate this again.
We're gonna start by recapping, sort of as a community, maybe what came out of last week's exploration around leisure. I don't know if anybody did any kind of like journaling or any sort of revelation.
I did.
I did too.
I did.
Yeah. Want to say anything yet?
Would you mind to share maybe something specific?
My journal had 4 lines. I really didn't have anything to say about leisure, but I did answer the other questions. Gee, if I'd have known, I would have had it in front of me. I sort of, this particular topic and theme is what I've been thinking about all summer. And so I'm sort of a step ahead. Regrets, oh yes, I've got plenty of them. And the regret that I will have if I don't do it before I die is to finish writing my book. So I have a plan for how I'm going to do it. And it starts on October 1st, after I'm done with all my doctor appointments. So that's about all I have to say.
For me, I had a sense of responding more immediately to intuitive ideas that came up, is to not postpone them, but to, the idea, oh, I need to exercise today. Well, let me just do it now. And so I had much more of a sense of that, of feeling the leisure of the time and the moment, and that there was no reason for me to delay on something that occurred. And so it was, an added sense of leisure, I think, of just being in the things that came up as they occurred. So that's how it was for me. But it was richer for me than it had been the week before, I will say that. So talking about the subject and paying attention to it was helpful. But I'm also reading the No Resistance book, The War of Art, and that is very valuable, I think, as non-resisting things as they come forward. So
I think that's very helpful to me in not procrastinating and not going into a default mode of just stuff I always used to do, and to take advantage of the opportunity, if I think of it, to go to that yoga class or to do what it is I want to do. Just kind of being awake to that.
I have been trying to make my days a little more structured, which I guess is a form of manipulating leisure. And I found, to my surprise, how the days got longer, and there's much more time in them. And it's kind of amazing.
yeah.
It's really good. I hope I can keep it up.
Yeah. I spent most of Sunday, it was raining on Sunday, and I spent most of Sunday reading. And I look up and I think, oh my gosh, it's only 1 o'clock. And then I read and read and read, and I say, how come it's only 2 o'clock? It was one of those times when you were a child that the day seemed never to end. It was so fabulous. And I had that kind of day. I haven't had that in 20, 30 years, 40 or 50 maybe. It was really quite delicious.
Today, Edo-san?
Sunday.
Oh.
Sunday, yeah. It was on Sunday. It was just rained all day, and it was
Very nice.
nothing much happening, so it was nice. time just sort of stretched out.
On the subject of regrets, reminded me, excuse me, when I briefly visited the San Francisco Zen Center in late April, I entered the building and I felt a great deal of sadness, personal sadness, and I couldn't figure out, what the heck's going on here. And I realized I was feeling profound regret, the likes of which I just had never experienced. And I think it was regret that I did not continue the practice that I started in my mid-20s. And so I've been thinking about that quite a bit over the last few months, and being reminded again from last week's discussion that I finally concluded regrets are fairly pointless. I mean, regrets for me, I think, results in feeling guilt, which I think is also pointless. Certainly as a motivating force for changing one's behavior. And so the great realization was I don't need to be feeling regretful for what I didn't do for most of my adult life. And in fact, it's a very positive force in guiding me today in continuing this wonderful practice. And so I've turned regret on its ear, so to speak, into a very positive force as I look forward to the rest of my life.
I think that's what or at least my experience of this, is that leisure is so complex, so much more complex than I thought it would be. And I think that's sort of like, I think the theme of like this, for me, maybe two elements that I kind of hear in these stories. It's like working with leisure is kind of like working with that impetus to engage life in a more full way, but it also comes with that element of choice as to like what can we usefully engage and what can we not? Like what is the nature of choice itself? I think I learned two things today in this syndrome.
Only.
Well, I think two is pretty good for me. But I walked in and I realized, like, why there's no holiness in Zen.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just not useful for anything. You know, I mean, if you just think that you're holy, like, you're not doing anything. There's no contribution to your life or to anyone else. It doesn't engage anything. But then I sort of sat down, and it's why these moments are just why I love this practice so much. But I've been trying to figure out how to ring this bell, like, since I've been practicing here. And it's always eluded me. And I realized, like, when I was striking it today, that I was thinking about the striker and the bell. And I realized I have no control over either the striker or the bell. All I control is the activity. Why not just think about the activity and drop the striker and the bell? And I think it sort of gets into this, like, choice idea. It's like, I think the only thing that we really have choice around is what we do. And I think as this relates to leisure, when I have those moments where I have some, let's call it greater freedom, greater potentiality, where I'm not obligated to do something for work or for errands or just, you know, the necessities of life, but I'm in those moments where I'm totally fluid. I think all I really have choice on is, like, the activity that I do. I think that that's sort of where
You also have a choice about how you do it.
which is the activity.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's that impetus and
Mhm.
kind of engaging.
The attention and engagement,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's this one. Yes.
Which is
Thank
the topic for this evening, is sort of choice as it relates to leisure.
I have to ask, I'm sorry, what does with a sense of of congruity informing our sense of identity mean? I don't understand the last third of the first sentence at all.
When one is congruent, one's mind and action are in sync. There's a kind of a heartful wholeness to them that there's no gap between the intention and the action.
Okay. And how does that inform my sense of identity?
I think it would be helpful to look at the second question first,
Oh, okay.
which I think the video is.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna show you a short video. It comes from Mr. Robot. Those of you who watch Mr. Robot. It's a pretty raw, but very, very interesting series on Netflix, is it on? Or, no, it's on Amazon, I think you can catch it.
It's on Netflix.
Netflix, okay. Anyway, this is a little sequence from this one, and we just have it on this screen. So if you want to see, you could sit on the floor if you want to see the screen better, Bob, because you won't be able to see from there. I'm just going to put it here.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
When considering choice, it's sort of like that idea of holiness. I think it's related. It's like to operate in that sense of like funneling what you can actually control as opposed to what you can't is, I think, a large element of leisure. And how much time like a human being can spend worrying about things that we have no control over. I think a lot of us do that, at least some of the time. I think that's part of the human condition. And so when thinking about choice, like what we really have choice over is what we do in the moment. Like I can't choose that certain people are in the room or certain people who are in the room are not. I don't have choice over that. I can influence this. But in this moment I can only really engage in my activity of how I meet this. But then the question becomes, what should my activity be? How do I know what to choose for my actions? And I think the way that we kind of explored this in choice is that to answer that question, I think a really profound way of determining that is to have some imagination as to what you want your life to look like. And then to have that imagination, that image, that dream, that goal, that thing that you know that you would regret having not done, knowing that and just having that inform yourself in the present to illuminate and inform your activity itself. And I hope that that explains the questions.
Yes,
Does that make it make sense?
that helped.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The part of it that I'm a little bit stuck on is the idea of imagining into the future how something ought to go, and when it doesn't turn out the way you want, we can become very frustrated about that. And so when I'm looking at part two, that's where I'm going. That this is a recipe for frustrating yourself when things don't turn out the way you want them to be.
What's interesting is I hadn't thought of that idea of like calculating out. Because to me, it's less about determining the sequences than just imagining what you want to manifest. Like what you want more of, I think.
And not the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a balancing issue, that we imagine something particular that we want to manifest in life, but at the same time, we can't be deterministic about it. If we are, then we will keep a very straight line about where we want to go, and it's never like that. It's always a zigzag line. And there are all kinds of ways that we wind up going, and so we have to allow a really wide field of possibility as we go toward that manifestation. That's how I feel with it, Amir.
Yeah.
That if I say I'm going to do this and I'm going to go that way, it's not going to happen. I mean, as my first Zen master said, the devil always travels on a straight line. So it's just, you got to keep a wide field.
Yeah. And that helps explain
Yeah.
the second part.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're pretty much talking straight to me. You're preaching to me, because I have a felt sense of the work I want to manifest.
Yeah.
It's been growing in me for decades.
Yeah.
And yet I'm so easily attached to certain forms of doing that work that have social value, or a feeling of prestige, or a feeling of and I get I get my undies in a bundle so much about getting it right that perfectionism is a major form of my resistance.
Sure.
But then to widen open the scope and say, wait, I can do this. So I'm a hospital chaplain, but the work of a hospital chaplain is to be empathically present with whomever is in front of you. Like, I'm jobless right now, so I'm all anxious about this, but the whole world is full of opportunities for me to practice. And I've been like, it sort of hit me over the head today, so.
Okay. Well, talking about practice in sesshin, my first teacher always said that coming to sesshin was like going to the hospital. So, because we're coming to fix ourselves in some way. And it's aside from anything else that we have in our lives. Totally unusual. We get fed our meals, and we have a whole different schedule, and we, don't do what we want, and it's sort of like being in the hospital. So, welcome to sesshin. But Kobun Roshi always said, it's just like going to the hospital. And we come out and we're repaired in some way after that practice. So, yeah.
I've really always felt that repair at least has something to do with like our willingness to be here and like
Yes.
engage our life.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, practice is the impetus. We don't just sit on the cushion. We have to get up off the cushion and then do something. We have to live somewhere and live in some way. But the cushion is the impetus for us to be able to understand that manifestation so that we can manifest in the best way possible. That's what practice is for, and it's what it's doing, if we come to the cushion and practice.
And I think our leisure really like fuels that, because
Mhm.
when we're engaging our life in a way that is meaningful to us, where we're working towards like what we want to manifest,
Yes.
that I think fuels our willingness to be present.
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think that that practice widens the field of what we can imagine for that manifestation, because we may think that we want to manifest something in particular, and yet if we truly engage in practice, it gets wider and wider and wider, and so that it it's wide, and yet it moves in a particular direction that we could not have imagined truly in the first place. So we imagine the future and it keeps widening and that imagination grows wider and wider. That's how I see it.
I think I just saw what we're doing with leisure in a new way.
Ah, okay.
Because that's like our practice. It's that like imaginative mind, like growing that.
Yeah.
And this work with leisure is like taking that same imaginative mind and like giving it, I want to say like a playground, but some field
exactly.
of expression,
Exactly.
which I think is just such a meaningful and engaging way of spending leisure time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just more
Mhm.
rewarding and
Yes. Mm-hmm.
it's additive to us.
Yeah.
I know that during that long vacation I had this year, that was, I wanted to answer, I think it was, I wasn't thinking about leisure per se, but one of the very important and wonderful things we can do with leisure is to ask ourselves these questions about what we want our lives to look like. And so it just so happened that I was, and it was like play in that I did things that I enjoyed with those questions in the back of my mind. So I might write, I might do a poem, I might take a walk, I might do any number of things. I might read a novel, but those questions that were there, and I came to some clarity about how I want my life to look. And it may not look that way. But the other thing is, when you take those steps toward the life that you had envisioned, then if something happens that it's not going to work, you're not going to be able to do that, I know that there will be another way that opens up. And just to be open to that, not to cling to the way that I thought it was going to be.
Right. That's
And I think taking those steps toward that goal that you envisioned is how you find out. It's how I'm finding out. And it could change tomorrow. It could change tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's healthy. That's a very healthy way to go. Yeah.
It just like hit me how like markedly different this is, I think, from cultural norms. Because it's like asking, I mean, you're talking about walking and writing and engaging your mind and what is meaningful, and it has nothing to do with like consuming anything or having more of something. And just like how much more fulfilling life is that way. And how counter that really is, I think, to the impetus. Which I think is really kind of engaging that question. Like maybe our cultural norms around how we should spend our time are failing us. I think this is like an...
One of the things I did when I was in Japan, when I was teaching, was to teach the Japanese in English about their own culture, because they had to pass exams in English. And typically they were asked to explain their own culture. So that was one of the things I had to teach. But I taught it in terms of high culture and low culture, because pachinko and karaoke and some of those other things were different from the symphony and the ballet and those kinds of things, and or even kabuki theater and Ono theater and all of these very highbrow kinds of things. And so I don't like to split the culture off that way, but at the same time to understand that, kind of in Olympia, the general occupation is shopping. I mean, typically that's what people do here.
Yes.
Retail is the biggest thing that you will find in Olympia. So I think we have to be careful to understand what it is we want to do, and when we know that we have to engage in the totality of the culture, and at the same, respect it, not judge that at the same time, and then choose well in terms of those activities that feed us well, and that's what we're saying the same thing. But I look at it in high and low culture a little bit without trying to offend it. You know?
Like buying a shirt is a fun thing. And
Yes,
we
it
need
can
shirts.
be. You do, and so you do need to shop. I'm not saying one shouldn't shop, but where one's activity, or when we have, boy, I'm not feeling really good today, I think I'll go buy something. That's dangerous.
Sure.
That kind of thing is dangerous.
Choosing the activity that nourishes us, I
Yeah.
think is an important concept. The dynamic of choice is essentially imagining. Another way of looking at choice is not imagining, but exercising certain discipline, which I have found healthy in my life, especially in the last 6-7 months. So part of the discipline that I choose to bring to my daily life is getting up every morning at 5:15 and sitting zazen. And that doesn't just give me a sense of continuity, it provides the continuity that nourishes my soul, nourishes my mind day to day. And finding continuity is a very fluid feeling, and within that fluidity it helps me, I think, be more aware of what I'm doing moment to moment. But that discipline is just it's a great choice. We can all do it.
You sound a little bit like Pressfield, and do you have a copy of the book, The War of Art?
I do not.
Because the first chapter is about recognizing resistance to our engagement, this kind of leisurely, broad, heartfelt passion for life engagement. But the second chapter is, he calls it going pro. And that's when you discipline yourself. When the image is of the writer who every morning shows up with an empty pad of paper at 6 a.m. and works with that empty pad of paper until 1 or whatever, and then move. So that same kind of thing that you just, rain or shine, moon-faced, sun-faced, you just keep at the practice of the work.
But I think what starts out as discipline, maybe you'll agree, turns into love. It does, ultimately. It just does. It's transforming. That act of, you just have to do it after a while, because it's an act of love. And maybe you don't notice it, but it's what's transforming. It's what happens. So.
Well, in those things that matter, because I remember that, like, in my own practice, where it's like you wake up and you're engaging, like, whether to do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get beyond that, and you're no longer like, your ram's no longer going to whether or not I do this,
Yeah.
you're just free to, like, engage the activity even more.
Yes. Well, that is deadly. Should I do this or not? I mean,
Oh,
that's
that's
where
not-
Pressfield comes in too. I mean, the worst thing in the world is to get up on a cold morning. Should I do this? Should I get out of bed or not? Oh, it's deadly. So it's best to go past, I mean, you have to get past that. And it crops up in times, every once in a while it crops up. No matter how long you've been sitting, it still crops up every now and then. And you have to just dismiss it. It's resistance. It's the whole, satanic resistance coming at you. So you have to just not listen to it, and you just do. So, but, yeah. So, how's how's everybody then with any of this discussion? Don't want to keep everybody here forever, but we're a little bit longer on these nights when, you know, for the time being, when we are having these conversations so that we can speak out, yeah. So we're gonna, thank you. We're gonna leave with questions to take home tonight for you to consider in your journal. And explore these things. You know, if you've never kept a journal before, if you've never really explored your internal way, this journaling, this is a great way to do that. A great way to explore the inner workings of yourself and have a conversation with yourself in a journal. And or as you know, as I suggest in this first, we suggest in this very first question to you know, take a do I say that? Do we say that there? No. To take a piece out of your reading, whatever it is you're reading, you know, an interesting paragraph, and respond to it as though you were talking to the author. That's a really very fine way to hold a conversation. I've done that for a long time in my morning writings. If I'm reading a particular book that I find cool and stimulating, I just speak to the author in my writing. Really, really useful, really helpful. I mean, every piece of writing is just a conversation. Everything out of the past is just a conversation for us to engage with now. So we can just keep it going. So. Okay, everybody, anybody else anything? Anybody else want to say anything at all? Anything at all?